Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room. Hope you're doing well, guys. Today I'm going to be looking at a comment from Eden Blair, who commented on my Destiny, the Destiny of the INFJ video, and I think brought a perspective that's quite interesting and that I'd like to react to it. I'm assuming that since he has, his comments public there, that he doesn't mind me doing that. So I will read his comment. It's a long comment, so I'll try to be speedy in doing that, and then I'll have a little reaction. Okay, so let's go. Eden says, this is a very confusing topic. So the question of personal destiny, right, from a particular person or type's perspective. As an INFP, so Eden is INFP, I struggle to define or feel comfortable with the concept of my best self. I am gay and very attracted to muscular, toned men. But I also notice that I like blue eyes, blonde hair, etc. All qualities I lack. I can gain muscle, but to what extent? What is an ideal body? What does it look like? Everyone's body is so different. I spend hours comparing my body to other people's, trying to imagine my ideal body. And why stop there? Should I straighten my curly hair? Why not get rhinoplasty because I have a big nose? Why not get permanent colored lenses surgically inserted into my eyes so they are not boring brown anymore? This strikes a moral dilemma. I am half black, half white, and American, so naturally I notice the racial implications of these thoughts. It weighs heavily on my FI. Why don't I love myself for who I am? Am I a sellout? Is the future of black Americans to simply be whitewashed by buying into capitalist America? Are black people truly inferior? How do I value my own life or the lives of other Africans living in poverty? Should I try to integrate into black culture in the US or try to live on the African continent? Not surprisingly, thoughts of suicide occur, and things get more complicated when you factor in gay identity. I don't know, the whole best self, constant improvement thing seems like a white supremacist paradigm that rose up from the Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution, when European societies were gaining power and wealth for themselves at the expense of non-white peoples. I'm interested in history, religion, geography. I love learning, but at this point, constant improvements, in inverted commas, for me is not oriented around consistent action and goal setting. It's more about awareness, letting myself be me, and resisting narratives that evaluate the worth of human life from a more FE or T perspective of how well you can form or perform to external standards. So that's Eden's comment. Thank you so much, Eden, for your comment, for its honesty, for its depth, for its insight. I think that it was courageous of you to share this, and it definitely brought a lot of, nuance to the whole discussion. And so here is how I would answer you, basically. I think that essentially all that you raise here is right, is legitimate, and it's not exactly like I can say that I'm exactly in your position. I mean, in a way, I am a white, straight male, and I have no doubt that this makes things easier for me, societally speaking. So I can only imagine the sort of pressure that people who have minority identity or are mixed, how much more difficult, stressful, harrowing these questions can be. And I think that you're right to emphasize that there can sometimes be something a little bit, I wouldn't say necessarily uncomfortable, maybe a little bit hypocritical about, let's say, straight white males or white people having these motivational talks about what a successful life should be, in different steps. You do this, you do that, how to have a successful life, how to have a good life, how to achieve this, how to achieve that, how to self-improve. because it leaves outside of the picture. It's kind of an implicitly sometimes, by its emissions, by what it emits, it definitely has a somewhat ethnocentric perspective. I mean, not all the time, but it can. I agree with you. Now, I would also be a little bit wary of these self-improvement discourses, depending on where they're coming from and how well they contextualize a particular person's situation. That being said, in my video about the relationship between the INFJ and the question of self-improvement, you know, if I probably used the term self-improvement in the video, I probably use it. You know what, like, I think in hindsight, and this is very interesting because this is how we learn, you know, by having exchanges, by having a dialogue. If I were to make this video again, I do not think that I would use the word self-improvement. And not only because it has the connotations which you emphasize, and I think you emphasized rightly that it has those connotations. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that the concept of self-improvement has direct connection with white supremacist ideologies. I mean, I'm not saying that white supremacist ideologies borrow from this kind of discourse. They do, but you know, they're not the only kind of ideologies, and I think in a way maybe they're a bit more extreme. However, that being said, I think that the whole concept of improvement, self-improvement, but not just self-improvement, improvement of something as basic as improvement of the use of one's land, improvement of the way in which man or woman relates, or you know, how they relate to their environment, how they make the best use of their environment, how they manage to extract the most resources from the environment given the smallest possible amount of time. Is essentially improving one's relationship with one's environment so as to make it more and more efficient. Well, that's definitely, you're right to point out, it has an Enlightenment origin. I think that the Enlightenment was really the sort of starting point. I mean, it had antecedents. There was something germinating before that in the work of Carl von Linnaeus and naturalists and other people in the late 17th and early 18th century. But it crystallized in the Enlightenment is the beginning of this kind of ideology of progress. You know, what actually in my PhD thesis I go so far as to call it scientific imperialism. The imperialism of Western reason, in a way, which when it comes to the expropriation of Native American lands, you know, from Native Americans, and forced relocation to reserves, Trail of Tears, these different tragic episodes of American history, the extent to which there was an ideological, scientific ideological backing to these, a form of legitimation which came from a discourse that essentially said, we, you know, expropriators of this land, essentially take it because we will make more efficient use of it. We will come with our tools, we will come with our technology, with our know-how, we will improve the use of the land. And this is where this concept of improvement is a very slippery one. It has imperial connotations, for sure. And with the imperial connotations come the discrimination, discrimination, expropriation, you know. These various things are very important to emphasize, and I think they are important to emphasize up to the present day. You know, it's no joke. It's still very much something that's going on, and it's a discourse that we still hear. Although it's true that in philosophy nowadays there are lots of critical voices. I mean, and there has been critical voices ever since. Well, it's been a long time, but I guess they came to a head with the postmodern movements, but other movements as well. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Now, that gives context and that gives you the sort of explanation of why I don't think I would use self-improvement. The first half of the explanation of why I would not use that term. Now, the second explanation doesn't have to do with these various implicit ideologies within the concept. It has to do with the fact that even according to what I wanted to portray, I don't think the INFJ is obsessed with, that's not necessarily, let's say, obsessed, but is completely hyper-focused on improvements as such. It's not really improvement that the INFJ seeks, you know. I don't know if improvement in the sense in which you meant it in your comments is sought by any particular type. I mean, it's all too tempting to think of ENTJs or something like that as pursuing it, but honestly, I lack the evidence. I have not researched this question. It's theoretically tempting to think that, but who knows if that's true. As far as the INFJ is concerned, I don't think it's so much a question of improvement. You know, in my videos, I really emphasize a lot of the time the question of self-acceptance, and I think that self-acceptance in a way runs counter to this idea of improvement. Self-acceptance, I think, is about embracing the self that one was given in a way, that one has, and making peace with it, you know. Instead of feeling that in order to finally get to a point where one can embrace this self, one first needs to bring all these various kinds of modifications to it. Of course, I agree, to a large extent, this is only a flight forward. The more one does that, the more one will be dissatisfied with oneself, and that just never will end, you know. So there is a point at which one, I think, has to just come to terms with oneself, if that's possible. From self-acceptance comes confidence, but what I think is that at least for someone who has a personality makeup that tends towards INFJ-ness, because that's kind of the perspective from which I'm speaking, it's the one I know. It is very much a part of self-acceptance, of true self-acceptance, to engage in what I somewhat inaccurately called self-improvement in my previous video. So this authenticity and self-acceptance that is essential for anyone, and including for the INFJ, includes this self something. Maybe we can try to find a better word for it now, a word that works. To me, it is not self-improvement so much as the fulfilling of a potential. So, and that's the whole notion of destiny as well. It's this idea that the INFJ feels like they often, you know, there's this meme sometimes that's applied to INFJs that says, I was born with a mission, except I have no idea what it's supposed to be, you know. And I think that's something that INFJs have felt, because I think mostly through NI, but also through the universalizing tendencies of FE, we are likely to conceive of the world as something towards which we're directed, like we have a purpose in vis-a-vis the world. We're directed somewhere, but it's quite hard to know what it is. And learning to become familiar with what we're supposed to do is part of the learning process about oneself, and also part of the whole self-acceptance thing. And so I think that's kind of constitutively a part of the INFJ. It's not about being a particular individual, say individual X, and becoming like 2X or X squared or X plus 3 as a result of improvements. It's rather about managing to disclose the fullness of the potential of X to oneself, to become the full X rather than only part of X. So you start with this inherent potential, the point not being to improve upon other things that one would not otherwise realize, but rather to realize the inherent potential that one is born with to start with. And an INFJ doesn't necessarily have full awareness that there is this potential within them, but I think they tend to have a drive towards wanting to fulfill it somehow. So it's the fulfilling of a potential that one has to begin with. So, and that's connected to the whole leaving a mark. You know, it's not seeking to improve, it's seeking to, there's a perfect expression for it. It is Nietzsche, and I've mentioned it before, but Nietzsche, who was a tremendously insightful anti-dominance, said it, and it's exactly, I think, and so maybe that suggests that INTJs have the same thing. Maybe it's an anti thing more than an IFE thing. Nietzsche says, become who you are. Become who you are. So you are something in potential, become it in actuality. But it's who you are. It's not an improved version of what society tells you. In fact, this becoming who you are aphorism, this call to become who one is, and I think speaks probably to lots of anti-doms, requires an authenticity to always remain focused on who one really is and not on what ones feel pressured to become other than one, because one is ashamed of oneself, you know, and everyone can feel that kind of shame, and society, you know, the media can really contribute to increasing that sense of shame or of feeling inadequate, and obviously one's background plays a huge role in here. So I wouldn't say that's what I talk about in my previous video about the destiny of an INFJ is to improve beyond what one's potential is to start with, is to actually realize that potential, realize the promise that is to realize the promise that is announced by the existence of one's very self, as it is, in full authenticity. And so that's my perspective. And so guys, let me know if you know, Eden, let me know if that kind of resonates with you more, and everyone, let me know your thoughts. If you thought that was useful, to sort of specify a little bit what I meant by this destiny of the INFJ and becoming the best version of oneself as a fulfilling of a potential. All right, see you guys. Have a lovely day.